Welcome to the Energize, Explore, Enjoy podcast, where we bring you inspiring conversations about food, fitness, and adventure, fueled by the power of the energy pods. Let's do this! Get ready to explore the fascinating world of science with our guest on today's episode. Introducing James Kennedy, a British-born science communicator and author with a wealth of experience in captivating audiences with his insights on tackling irrational fear of chemicals. Join us as we delve into the wonders of science and discover the hidden discoveries behind everyday chemistry.
Hey there, listeners. This episode is sponsored by the ever-amazing KG Food Company's Energy Pods. Are you ready for a flavor adventure? Get ready to taste white chocolate strawberry, breakfast mocha noir, and the fan favorite chocolate nova. These pods are not only delicious, but also are packed with protein, healthy fats, and minimal sugar to keep you going all day. Plus, they come with a built-in spoon for your on-the-go snacking needs. So, don't wait another minute. Head over to kgfoodco.com, kgfoodco.com, and order some energy pods to fuel your life.
I trained as a chemistry teacher initially, right? I did natural science at Cambridge and then went to do study education here in Australia. And this banana poster was the first slide of my first ever chemistry lesson. And I just wanted to try and show that chemistry is relevant and interesting and it's everywhere. And that's what the poster was about. And I had no political agenda at all, right? It was literally a hook, we would call it in education, like to get everyone's attention, to get some discussion going before we get into organic chemistry, which is the topic. So I chose a banana as one of the most recognizable fruits and then just analyzed what was in it, not from my own experiments, but from literature that's already been done. People have already done this work. Like the later posters I made have references on the back. All right, if you turn it over, there's all the academic references on there. But this is published data on what's in a banana, and it's interesting the way that it was perceived. So students found it interesting, like, oh, I recognize some of those things, but some of them I don't. It started a bit of interest in the students. What surprised me was when I put it online, it literally went viral. It got reposted everywhere and modified, and it got into newspapers, New York Times even, and some others. What was fascinating was people assumed that I had some kind of political agenda. I was trying to show that one of two things, either that modern bananas are not real, like there is a fake banana industry that is cobbling together like fake bananas because they're cheap industrial synthetic banana. That's what some people assumed. And the other people were pro-chemistry. They were like, oh yeah, good on you. They got the message basically that I was trying to show. But this dichotomy really emerged, and you started to get, as usual in the Twitter comments, this back and forth of extremes. And that really alerted me to this fact that some people I actually want to say paranoid about the prevalence of chemicals around them. It's stifling for those people. And it's a small number of people. It's a small percentage, but it's up to 10% who will go to extreme lengths to avoid what they see as like chemical contamination. They perceive it as everywhere. And then it just got me down this rabbit hole of research. It was a summer holiday by this point, and I was just looking into the fear of chemistry, got into Michelle Frankel's work, and there's a lot of other researchers who've looked into this, like 5 or 10 of them. The fear of chemistry, and this became my thing. Why are some people so afraid of chemicals? And it turns out there's sort of 3 groups of people when it comes to the perceptions of chemistry. You get the ones who are pretty open about chemicals, appreciate the good that they do. Most scientifically literate people will be in that group. Then you've got the middle, which is the biggest group. The middle is sort of uninformed and doesn't really care that much. They'll sort of maybe think that chemicals are usually a bit bad, but they're also happy to use them. They don't have any strong opinion. Then you've got the other sort of 10% that I mentioned, which are chemophobic. And I really don't like that word, by the way, but they have this fear of chemicals. There's a clinical word for it, actually, better than chemophobia. It's multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome or something like that. It's a psychological thing, right? It's proven psychological. It's like the fear of Wi-Fi. It's that kind of thing. They've done experiments along this vein where they tell people there is Wi-Fi, very strong Wi-Fi in the room, and they get symptoms even though there's no Wi-Fi in the room.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a psychological thing. So, and this became huge. It became a discussion topic, and it became basically the next 10 years of conference speeches and trying to engage the public, trying to educate journalists on how not to push people into that category, and how to working with bloggers, influencers who are often not science trained on how to communicate chemical stories appropriately. Obviously teaching the whole time, trying to get the middle sort of 75% up into the loving chemistry part. That's been the bulk of my sort of bread and butter as well. But it all started with the banana. Really, just zooming in on the banana.
What's also important to notice here is that my journey really interwove with what you were making as well, because once I remember that when I was browsing around on Facebook, that's, I think, the first time I got exposed to one of your infographics. And I was like, holy moly. The brain just lights up immediately. You realize that everything is actually chemicals. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my brain? So let's dial back time a little bit. Let's talk about where the origins are. Has this chemophobia of some sort, or man, there's a difficult term that you mentioned. I don't know if I can use that, the psychological term, but going back in time, is there like some connection where there's an origin story here, or have we always been afraid of chemicals, or is this just like a new thing?
It comes and goes, right? So at the moment where it's dipped during COVID, we were not afraid of chemicals during COVID. We were afraid of the virus more or less, and the lockdowns and the vaccines and everything else, and the fear of the chemicals themselves actually dipped because we were buying more chemicals than ever to try hand sanitizers and bleach and other things and soaps, and so they were the smallest of our concerns. But it's rising again now. It comes and goes. It's always been there. Just it depends on to what extent. So if you go all the way back. I like to go all the way back to ancient history because I think about that as a sort of a lens to view many of the things that we do as humans. I think it does explain a lot about what we do now. We evolved telling stories in the savannah around campfires, essentially, and that image, I have that image on my wall of like early humans just around a campfire in the savannah, just in the evening. They're telling stories, they're cooking food, they're learning from each other in order to try and have a better hunter-gatherer experience the next day. And then we're talking 200,000 years ago now, but that's the time when fire was becoming widespread, language was becoming widespread as well, and our brain developed. And still we really separated from animals. It's a long process, but sometime around there, that's when we became fully sort of human. And why do I mention all of this? Because the stories we would tell would be stories of the hero's journey. So the hero's journey sort of archetypal story is it's the template for all our stories right now. Like every movie you go and watch is basically a hero's journey story. And what happens in the hero's journey story is you've got a hero who meets some kind of adversity, comes back changed, having defeated that adversity, right? They come back, but they come back to where they started, but the place is a bit different. They are different because they've been victorious. But what's interesting for me is there is usually an object involved, like a talisman we call it, that's gone on the journey itself. And that object comes back different too. So relating this back to like the hunter-gatherers sitting around the fire, we would have brought memory aids, I guess, souvenirs, I suppose, from our hunter-gatherer trips during the day, and we would have used those as memory aids, like a show and tell, like what I found. I killed an ox. I got a something. I went to the faraway place. I got a rock. These objects that we carry with us help us to tell the story. But what's interesting is there's a psychological phenomenon called provenance. And provenance is the idea that the story is actually in the object itself. It's not just a memory aid, but by going on a journey from somewhere exotic or dangerous and back to your home, that object contains a story physically. Now, scientifically, we cannot detect that. There's actually nothing that's happened to the object. It's just moved. But we act as if it's true. We act as if objects that have been on an interesting journey have more value. And it kind of makes sense. Like if you think about, let's say that there's an actor who wears, who carries a a bag or a shirt or something that's in a film, in a movie, that particular item will sell for a lot of money. But the identical item that's being sold down in Target would sell for $12 because it didn't go on that journey to the movie set. And there's lots of examples of this. You know, I remember Lady Gaga's nail clippings for like $10,000 and stuff. It's ridiculous, but we do act as if these things are true. If an object goes on a journey, it somehow embodies the journey in it. Okay, so How does this link to chemophobia? Well, we believe that if we can see that an object has gone on an unpleasant journey, we see that thing as unpleasant now, permanently. And there's lots of other psychological things that tap into this, which I'll get into later on. But like, if we can see that, say, a compound, or let's say a food has had something from a laboratory put into it, we act as if that food is now tainted, or if it's been through some kind of industrial food processing facility, we perceive that as unpleasant for whatever reason, then we see the food as being tainted. And a couple of interesting other points which we could go into is we believe once it's tainted, it can't be purified. It cannot rid it of that experience that the object or the food has had, or it could be a skincare product or whatever it is. So once it's been on that journey through a sort of artificial laboratory type setting, it's permanently tainted. That's the idea of contagion. And we believe that the idea of adding anything sort of industrial or chemical is going to increase its toxicity. So over processing and any industrialized chemical. But there's another whole reason for that as well. So putting all this together, we get this idea that foods and cosmetics that have been processed industrially, especially with any kind of anything synthetic added, are permanently then bad for you and gross and to be avoided. And I could unpack any one of those in great detail. But it sort of explains we've evolved from a long time ago to have the sort of hardware ready to be scared of chemicals. It's just a matter of, do we activate that, or do we learn that it's wrong and overcome it? Because we evolved a lot of wrong stuff, right? So we have to, but we overcome most of it through education. It's just that the fear of chemicals we are prone to that.
One of the questions, Corey, he handles our production, and I was talking to him about him earlier, like, what kind of question should I ask James this time around? And he mentioned something really interesting, and it sort of ties into what you just said, is that educating students seems to be a little bit on the easier side. Perhaps you have a better insight into it. But as people become older, it seems to become even harder to sort of re-educate them towards accepting that food or anything that we consume is made of chemicals. So what's going on there?
Well, people learn about chemistry in three ways, right? So when they're young, they get it from school. And you have a monopoly then as a teacher. All the kids' ideas of chemistry are taught between, we would say, grade 7 and grade 12. For most people, it's grade 7 and grade 10, because most students don't choose science the senior 2 years. So at least here it's the case. So at all, they don't do any science, most of them. So you've got basically grade 7 to grade 10, a monopoly on their knowledge of chemistry. And they come in at year 7 knowing nothing at all. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, there's 4 years. You can deliver lessons that promote chemistry as a discipline of, and I use these two words, creation and purification, because I believe that it's almost a spiritual thing. Like, it elevates chemistry to like some kind of transcendent spiritual good, right? But I believe chemistry should be promoted as a discipline of creation and purification, because by the time they finish school, they get their chemistry knowledge from two different places. No longer from school, obviously. They get it from marketing, right? Product labels and advertisements, and they get it from mass media. So Walter White, etc. You know, the evil chemists in TV shows. And marketing tends to swerve towards the chemicals are bad, therefore buy our product. That's a common, you make something a villain and then say, oh, ours doesn't contain that. And you can do this with any particular chemical. You can find any particular food group and write a book about a diet that doesn't include that, and it's a template for being a sort of, anyone, you can do that. They're not all based on science, so they learn from that when they're adults, and that's very difficult to control. No one person has a monopoly on that. Like that's an entire industry, and there's no space for as a teacher to go in and educate the adult, because they're not actually learning chemistry from adults, like from teachers. Sorry, they're learning chemistry from marketers. And then you've got the mass media. That there's nothing we can do about that, at least not in the short term. But when you've got Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Cox representing physics, right? They're huge, like physics heroes. And there are many others as well, right? But then you've got David Attenborough, and you've got who else? You could put Richard Dawkins in there, perhaps, the evolutionary biology. There are others, but David Attenborough is really the king of biology. And again, there are others. There's the Bear Grylls and the others. I suppose they're biologists too, but there are these really sort of respectable people representing biology and physics. And I say they're respectable because they're knowledgeable. You want to watch them. They're entertaining. They're wise. They're also like pleasant characters. Like you feel like they're good people beyond just being scientists. And then you've got Walter White, who doesn't know what he's doing at the beginning, and he kills a lot of people by like the third episode. And it's just evil, completely evil. And unfortunately, he's the most famous chemist there is. Who else is there? Like, I ask this every single time I do a keynote on this. I literally ask, who is more famous as a chemist than Walter White? And I never get an answer. The one answer that people do attempt is they say, the presenter of Chemistry: A Volatile History. It was a British documentary series, but the presenter of that was Jim Al-Khalili, who was a physicist, right? So the BBC did a documentary series on chemistry. Firstly, they named it Chemistry: A Volatile History. That's hardly a flattering title. Secondly, they never got further than 3 episodes, which just introduces the periodic table, and that's it. No more. So it would be like a food documentary where you're just studying episode 1, flour, episode 2, eggs, episode 3, milk, and you never actually look at any recipes, building compounds together. So, and the third thing is he's a physicist. He's a professor of physics. So he's, they couldn't find an actual chemist to present it, right? So yeah, I don't think there are any more famous chemists than Walter White, and that's another problem in the mass media, though. The only way we can do something about that is long-term. Find another chemistry hero and make something that is bigger than Breaking Bad. But that is just such a huge challenge. Who's really able to do that?
I know one person. I'm talking to him.
Well, it costs a lot of money. Like it's and to make it engaging, and it would be a team of 100 people, and it would take many years. But so some people say Bill Nye as well. So I looked into Bill Nye. But I'm a big fan of Bill Nye. A lot of kids grew up watching him. This generation as well. He's still popular now. And if you analyze the topics of Bill Nye's episodes, they're almost all physics and engineering. There are, I think, 2 chemistry episodes out of 5 whole series. So he's not a chemist at all. He's not even, I wouldn't even call him a balanced scientist across all the disciplines. He's very much physics and engineering, which makes sense. That's his background. And I think third place was biology as a theme. So yeah, I don't count Bill Nye. He's not more influential than Breaking Bad and marketing, which is where adults learn. And we can't, at the moment, compete with that.
Yeah, you're right. It's very difficult competing with mass media because at the whim of some entertainer, you'll have a flood of hundreds of thousands of people doing what they want them to do. It's almost like magic that we have created these monstrous sort of entities within our society. Sort of backtrack once more, you mentioned something happened during the 1960s which sort of amplified the whole bullseye towards chemicals. What was that?
Well, a couple of things. We'll just backtrack to the 1950s, right? So 1950s, chemophobia was at a low. And the reason was, I think, post Second World War in Europe, we were, many more adults, particularly women, get back into the workforce. We were looking for ways of saving time, also conserving food for a longer time. Society was changing in many ways. That meant we had a need for time-saving plastics, particularly single-use plastics. They were essential at that time. It's a shame now we've forgotten how good they are, but and just people were throwing them in the ocean. But anyway, we in the 1950s there was chemophobia was a low. We get into the 60s, it starts to rise again because in 1962, Rachel Carson wrote her book, right, Silent Spring. So if any of the listeners haven't read Silent Spring, I recommend actually getting it. It's a PDF online. It's open source. You can just Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. But bear in mind the following things, right? So Silent Spring is a dystopian. It's two parts, right? The introduction is a dystopian fiction about a completely unrealistic future where Earth has become devoid of all life because chemicals have taken over and the Earth is dead. Basically, that's chapter 1, and it's fiction. Completely unrealistic. Then the rest of the book is non-fiction, and it's about real concerns about DDT, mostly, and other things. So this book got put on the non-fiction shelf because it is 90% non-fiction. However, anybody picking it up is going to start reading at chapter 1 because it's a non-fiction book, and they're working through the fiction part, the first bit at the beginning, not realizing that is fiction. And I've got some quotes from the book. You can find these online. It's a very short first chapter, by the way. It's like 3 pages. And there's still horrible descriptions, harrowing, about all birds have died and people have died and the rivers are all poisoned and dried. And it's horrible, but the fact that it was on the non-fiction shelf scared people so much. Maybe that was what she wanted. I don't know. But she has, I mean, bear in mind that she wrote this book for multiple reasons. I mean, we could go into that, but the book was tainted by her own personal experience, I think. So the author was on chemotherapy at the time. In 1962 chemotherapy, where it was not particularly pleasant. It wasn't as advanced as today, and she was suffering a lot. So her book against chemicals in society was really a reflection of her own suffering against the chemotherapy symptoms. But she sort of projected that onto the world, and it is very sad actually when you read it. But the book was massively influential. 1962, Rachel Carson's book, and it sort of made chemophobia peak again. And then a few other things happened in the 1960s. So obviously the space race is getting on. And this, by the way, the space race wouldn't have happened without all the new materials and the plastics and everything else that made it possible, right? So on the one hand, we're saying chemicals are evil, but at the same time, we're loving the space race. Like that's, we're taking advantage of all the materials that the chemistry and chemical industries made for us. Then you get to 1968. So 1968 was, I think it was Apollo 8, where they went around the back of the moon and took a photo of Earth for the first time. And I've got that photo on my wall. So that photo, it's called Earthrise. It's called Earthrise. And you can see the Earth appearing to rise over the moon. And it was massively influential picture. That was the first image of the Earth as a whole from a distance. And it's hard to imagine there was a time when we'd never seen the Earth as a whole. But that image changed people's perspective. And it made people realize that the Earth is sort of wholesome and beautiful when you can't see the people on it because you zoomed out far enough. They took a sequel, I suppose, in 1972. It's called The Blue Marble. And The Blue Marble was better because it's clearer, it's bigger, and you can see the entire Earth. They took it from the right angle. So the sun is on the entire front of the Earth and it's all lit up, rather than the first one was like half lit, like a half moon type, half Earth, I suppose. Half light, half dark. But this one, the Blue Marble, 1972, whole Earth. And Neil deGrasse Tyson makes a really interesting point about this. He says that in that photo, that's the first map, I suppose, world map, where there were no borders written on it. And he's got this great video. He gives a keynote speech in the US, and he lists the effects that had on the environmental movement as people realize the Earth is beautiful as a whole without the sort of the marks that we've drawn on it to try and divide us. It made people feel united and worship almost Mother Earth. That became one of the most famous photos of all time. And what people don't realize, though, is that was on the front page of the New York Times. Within weeks, you then had Running Girl. I don't know if you're familiar with the Running Girl photo from Vietnam. So this was a photo taken. Yeah, it's a horrible photo, but it's the photo of the aftermath of a chemical weapon attack on a Vietnamese village. And there was a half Vietnamese, half American photographer went in there and took this photo of people fleeing the chemical attack. And those two photos, they were both front page of the New York Times within weeks of each other. So that juxtaposition in 1972 made people realize Mother Earth, beautiful, whole, untouched, pristine, and people evil, using chemicals to cause death and destruction. And that juxtaposition really just accelerated the fear of chemicals. And from then on, you had everything. The Environmental Protection Agency was founded. The whole catalytic converter thing, the mandates, I guess, came in. We've got the Clean Air Act came in. You also had all sorts of other lawsuits and cleanups for chemical disasters that might have been ignored 50 years before. Oil spills and all these other things as well. So it's that's basically what happened in the 1960s. A whole sort of series of social events which accelerated it. And then I think by the late 80s, we'd forgotten again somewhat. It waned. We were busy. I don't know what were people doing in the late 80s. Worried about East versus West politics and busy making money, I suppose. But then it picked up again, and here we are today. So yeah, it comes and goes. But the 60s was a particularly interesting time.
I think that with the advent of social media, the whole thing seems to have come back. Is that what your observation has been?
Oh, totally. But it's been a long time coming. It's before social media. So I mean, I got a chapter in the book that I wrote on this. I actually called it post-modernism, and I called it out like in 2015. The first time I had a slide, I found a slide from a keynote. I blamed post-modernism for the recent uptick back in 2015. And back then, what I said was, that's actually, I'll bring up the slide here. I'll read it to you. So again, I quote, this is from 2015, before it became as a scapegoat for everything today. Experts are no longer automatically trusted. The cult of the amateur has emerged. Scientific truth is just one opinion.
Wow.
So, and I don't like to overthink things, right? But the postmodernism movement, it's broad. It's hard to define exactly. But one of the things that we're seeing recently is, in my perception, and the listeners will chip in and they'll comment and go, no, that's not what postmodernism is. And that's okay. I'm interested in having that discussion. So, is renegotiating the norms that we've constructed through the modernist era. Just renegotiate everything. Just knock it all down and rebuild it from scratch, just in case we got anything wrong. That includes not automatically assuming that experts and educated people should be trusted at the top. We should renegotiate that and figure it out from first principles all over again. And what that's resulted in is like knocking down the house of cards and just saying, okay, we're all on the bottom now, we're all equal. The doctor his view is equal with this blogger's view, which is equal with the president's view, which is equal with my uncle's view. They're all equal. And social media has allowed that to happen, but that mindset came first. We wanted that. We wanted that equality of views and equality of exposure of views and equality of respect of all views, even if they're ridiculous. And we wanted that before social media came. Social media just provided that, and now we're thriving. Well, we're not. We are lapping it up, even though it's really not good for us. We really should be trusting educated opinions much more than uneducated ones. But you know what's going on out there. There's all sorts of nonsense on social media that proliferates, and people listen.
So, looking at the global educational landscape, like for example, you're down in Australia, and you've also taught in China for about 4 years as well. So could you do like a side-by-side comparison to sort of analyze what your observations are, especially pertaining to chemistry? Like, what is the global situation, and where's the net effect going towards? Are we moving in a positive direction in different countries, or is it going to be sort of a big problem in the near future when it comes to education and learning, and especially taking into the context of the power of social media and the same effects that you just mentioned?
Social media is a major problem, and that's a problem that we are facing, I say, in the West. I don't like the term the West, like I don't like the term chemophobia, right? But, I mean, how else do we? The G7, I suppose? I mean, the sort of democratic, open, wealthy countries, right? It's a problem we have. It's a serious problem, social media, and I have spent 4 years in China working there, and, I speak fluent Chinese, and I'm always keeping up with developments in China and see the direction it's going. I love China. I want China to thrive and succeed. I want it to be one of the world leaders culturally, economically, to be safe and stable and a great place to live and all of that. One thing that they're doing, I don't want to say well, but better than us, is managing fake news online. And I don't think they've got it 100% right, but fake news can't really spread that fast through China. I mean, I'm all for free speech, but when, we are suffering from the consequences of too much exposure of our freedom of speech. I think that summarizes. I believe in freedom of speech, but we are having algorithms that amplify dumb things, and that's what China won't allow. So you can say whatever you want in China on social media, but each group is limited to 500 people, and celebrities can't have more than there's a certain number of followers. It just kind of a certain number of likes on a post. It kind of maxes out, so you can't. Nobody's more famous than say 100,000 likes. It just says more than 100,000. You don't know who's super huge and who's just slightly huge. So they're doing a few things. Yeah, once you get to 100,000, you don't. It just says 100,000 plus. You've reached fame, and you don't know whether it's millions or tens of millions. You don't know. It creates a sort of equality at the top with still freedom. I'm not saying it's a perfect system at all. It's really not. There are lots of things I don't like about that system. Like, there's lots of information you can't find, and Google doesn't work, and lots of other services don't work. But yeah, it's not perfect at all. But we are suffering from the consequences of doing the opposite, which is just complete freedom and it's not the freedom that's the problem. It's the amplification of misleading things, and then large actors are playing the system to look like a large number of small irrational actors and manipulate people into thinking stuff. But we wanted it. That's my point. We wanted it. Before social media came, we wanted equality of thoughts. Everybody's thoughts to be treated equally with equal respect and equal airtime. We actually wanted that before it came along. And now we've got this problem which exists here, not so much in China, which exists here, that science is just an opinion, that you can go through the rigor of academia and years, master's degree, PhD, the rigor of a scientific study for many years, and come out and you've got then somebody just saying, no, fake news, or no, you can just making something up, and it gets treated with equal respect among an uneducated audience. And I think I call it postmodernism. It's one of the tenets of postmodernism. We just don't trust the hierarchy we've built, which was actually based on ability and education. We've brought it right down. But the Chinese don't have this so much. They're quite happy to look up to experts, and again, not a perfect system, but they'll look up to the experts and go, yep, I agree with that. That's also not right. You've got to be skeptical. Yeah. What happened here, it's very unfortunate with our system here. We had experts here saying, don't wear a mask, and then you must wear a mask. And then we also had, no, how dare you say it came from a lab? And then, it came from a lab, right? So, and there are other things now. I am not going to say what they are, but I've got a list of predictions of things which I think will become untrue in the next couple of years. Things you cannot say right now, but come back in 2025 and we'll be like, I should tell you offline. But things that the way the official narrative will completely change. So no one's doing a perfect job at this, but we are suffering the consequences of social media and having everyone's opinion taken equally. I don't know what the solution is. I really don't. But more discussion is certainly one of the parts of the solution.
One of the ways I look at it is that America, for example, our country has really tied influence to monetary gains. That's a huge problem here. And I think that's a powerful driving force where science gets trumped by someone saying with large following. So yes, I do think that influence is a huge issue. Another thing is, just to add to the whole freedom of speech concept here, is that I'm not against it either. But the way I think about it is, when you entered the industrial age, we had ways to sort of expedite processes. We had rules in place. We had everything streamlined. We're in the information age right now, and I think we don't have the right tools to sort of navigate the waters. Like, for example, if somebody who's been working 40, 60 hours a day, they're going to go online and look up something that their friend mentioned at the work, and they're going to find the most popular thing because, maybe popular is the best and it seems to work. So by that proxy and sort of pipeline, these people get brainwashed or indoctrinated in bad information, which brings me to a very interesting question for you, which is the rise of artificial intelligence. So what's going on with there? What's your sort of outlook on it? And are there any concerns that you have, or do you see a positive light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, definitely positive. Very much pro AI. I use it. I subscribe to ChatGPT, and it's mind blowing the pace of advancement. So we have to embrace it, like every other technology. It's not as scary as people admit. It's not as scary as people say. So it's probably as world-changing as maybe, I would say, somewhere between the invention of DVDs and the invention of the internet. I'd put it somewhere between there. It's less influential than the internet, but it's more influential than DVDs. The ability to watch high-res digital movies. It's another tool, and we have to use those tools. This is our human history. Again, I go back to ancient humans' evolutionary history. The pattern of human evolution has been always to concentrate more energy use and more knowledge into ever smaller units and use them faster. And it's exponential. That's been the pattern of human development. So then it's just the next logical step. So, AI comes out of sort of predictive text and cluster analysis, machine learning for statistics. It's only a step above that. It's just gone from being a tool for professionals to public, right? ChatGPT just made it public. But they're not just out the blue, like Prometheus, just sort of from the sky. They were already tools, and then one step more, and now they're public. For ChatGPT, for example. When you think about predictive text, we've had that before, and no one was afraid of, at least a couple of years ago, nobody was afraid of it. Maybe at the beginning, people were worried that your phone was learning what you say and then giving you the next word. But it's essentially, ChatGPT is a glorified version of that, trained on, we don't know what it's trained on. It's trained on large amounts of text on the internet. It's the next logical step, and we have to embrace it. And the people who don't embrace it will be left behind. It's inevitable. We could agree it's going to be good, it's going to be bad, but it's just the trajectory of human development, and we have to be on board or we'll be left behind. It's like, some particularly older people did not get on board with the internet. And, not being able to use the internet now, it's a bit of a problem. It causes inconveniences, not major ones. You got to walk into the town center to do everything. But those who don't get on board with AI will have those kinds of problems in the future as well. It'll just be harder to do stuff, or won't be easier like it is for the other people. No, big fan of AI. Self-driving cars. We've got to get the policy on board, though. So two things we've got to be aware of. Number one, firstly, get on board with it, or don't be left behind. But the two things we've got to be aware of: we need to have always a human being on top of the AI. Always, we have to have one human responsible for what the AI does legally. So, in the same way that we could build a tool, an AI is just another tool. We could build a hammer, for example. You can't sue the hammer company if you injure yourself or cause damage to the product you're making, right? It's the person's fault. The person has to take on that responsibility of using the tool and be legally responsible and be able to be punished for anything bad the tool does. If the tool malfunctions and hurts someone, it has to be the user's fault. And it doesn't work any other way. I'm not saying that's like ethically the right thing to do, but legally it doesn't work any other way. Otherwise we're in this quandary of like, machine did something, nobody's responsible. What's going to happen again then? And then the machines take over. So we have to have one, and when one person is responsible for each AI tool that is being used, so they'll be careful with it. They'll exercise restraint. They'll put that human judgment onto it and say, do I really want to put this out? So everything I've used AI for, I've ultimately put my name on and said, I will be responsible for this. If there's anything bad, I check it, obviously, for that reason. But if I wasn't sitting on top of it, if I wasn't legally responsible for what the AI makes, I'd copy paste without reading it and put it out on the internet. And that's where we get into a problem. There's another problem as well. If people start doing that and then there's nobody sitting on top, it's like sitting on top of the horse in a way. Like you can't have a extremely powerful, capable horse with nobody on top of it controlling it. Like, it's just going to do what it wants and ruin the village. So we need to have a person sitting on it, responsible for what that horse does. And then if that horse does something wrong, the rider gets punished, right? In religion, you'd say the AI doesn't have a soul, like animals don't have souls, right? In the religious context, meaning it's like they're not responsible legally for their actions because they're not conscious. And scientifically, whatever, it's just an analogy to say AI is like an animal in a way. We have to own it and control it and be responsible for everything it does, like a pet owner. You got a dog that bites someone, it's the owner's fault, right? If my AI writes some misleading information, puts it out, hurts someone, my fault, right? So I put my name on it. We have to stay on top of the AI. So what does that mean for like self-driving cars? Well, someone's got to be responsible, and it would have to be either the driver, which I think initially it has to be. Ultimately, you could say it's Elon Musk, although he's going to have a lot of trouble going forward if he takes responsibility for all the self-driving cars. So probably for a very long time, the responsibility is going to be in the hands of the driver.
You are an expert communicator, and at the same time, you've taught in various different schools. I'm just curious about 50 different schools. So I'm just curious, what do you see is going to happen in the future when it comes to, for example, artificial intelligence, teaching? Are we entering a new phase of education as we speak?
This question I've seen many times.
Hey listeners, before we jump back into our fascinating conversation, let's take a moment to appreciate the delicious goodness of KG Food Company's Energy Pods. These delightful pods come in a variety of amazing flavors, like white chocolate strawberry, breakfast mocha noir, and the ever-popular Chocolates Nova. And they're not just tasty, they're also packed with protein, healthy fats, and minimal sugar to keep you fueled throughout the day. Perfect for when you're on the go, these energy pods even come with a built-in spoon for your convenience. So, go ahead and treat yourself to these mouth-watering pods that'll make your taste buds dance. Visit kgfoodco.com, kgfoodco.com to grab your favorite flavors. And now, let's get back to our inspiring guest.
With every new technology, that people think that this new technology is going to revolutionize education. And the answer is no, it won't. Not that much. It'll be a small change, a small incremental change to what we already do. So think back to what was the first big change? Possibly, you could go way back to using paper versus using slate, for for example. Is this going to revolutionize education? No, it didn't. You can whiteboards instead of blackboards. Did that revolutionize? Not really. Not massively so. Keep going forwards. You've got, how about this, spell checkers? So that was a big debate back in the day, like when I was a kid. Turn off your spell checker. If you're typing your work, you should know how to spell. Right? And then we realized actually, kids are going to turn it on anyway. They'll have it off when the teacher's there, and they'll quickly turn it back on and then turn it back off. It's very difficult to turn off the spell checker now. But there used to be a button that you have to press to do the spell check. And so that ended up being, we went from being, no, we can't do this. The students will cheat. They won't learn how to spell, to encouraging students to use it. And now as a teacher, if I see a typed essay that's been badly spelled, I'll just say, check the spelling using Word. I'll encourage them to do that. And that's the pattern. We tend to go from skepticism to opposition and then encouragement for every technology that comes into education. So yeah, spell check was one, but then laptops was another one. Well, iPads and then laptops. It ultimately became laptops. So laptops in schools became a thing. It was maybe 10 years ago, roughly like that, where now the students are on their laptops all day, every day. I don't know what it's like in America. Do you know what they're doing in schools? Like here, like pretty much every school all day, I would say maybe not literally all day. It's like 4 lessons out of 5 in the day. They'll be on their laptops.
Yeah.
Except for sport.
Yeah. I remember when I went to college, and that was like many years back. We were using laptops regularly. I used to personally own a laptop myself all the time. I'd imagine now we just throw probably phones and tablets into the mix, probably tablets more so. So I'm not sure, but I can totally see that it's probably very similar over here as well.
Probably. I mean, what's happened here is it's now become compulsory to have a laptop in the student's school bag all day from grade 7 onwards. Compulsory. Like all the learning materials are delivered via the laptop. The laptop is open every lesson. That's the main means of learning. You also have a notebook, but most of the learning is done on the laptop. And you can tell because the school's printing budgets have plummeted. They used to be, $50,000 a year, whatever, and they'll be now like 12. They're just not printing anymore because most of the 12 will be end of year nice brochures and stuff. So everything is delivered electronically and the kids are on their laptops all day. And we thought, they're going to get, remember we used to be worried about was it you get square eyes? Remember that? That used to be a worry we had.
There's a lot of those, man.
So yeah, you get square eyes. They'll have hunched over posture and all these issues. We went from skepticism to opposition to let's embrace it, let's just do it, it saves the planet, and they learn better. And also an interesting upside of laptops was the discipline improved. So when you have kids who are a bit agitated, fidgety, usually they're boys, might be a difficulty engaging in the task for a long period of time, they get a Chrome extension for a little game. Because the schools can all block the game sites, they can block Steam, they can block all of that. But for some reason, they can't block Chrome extensions, and you can get Tetris and stuff on the browser. So these fidgety kids, instead of like pushing and stealing rubbers and erasers and not rubbers, we call them erasers off the table, and stealing pencil, whatever, causing a little minor chaos in the classroom, they'll just get on to play Tetris and Pac-Man on the Chrome extension, and discipline actually improved. Those kids who are disengaged no longer bother others, and the same thing happens during recess and lunch. Like there's a downside, right? There's less physical play now. There's a lot less sport happening, voluntary, spontaneous sport at recess and lunch, because everyone's on their devices, on their laptops. So yeah, the upside was physical bullying went down, and disruption in the classroom definitely went down with the introduction of laptops, and now we encourage it. So the same thing will happen with AI. So what will happen with AI? We've gone from, no, they're going to cheat on their essays, and no, let's block it, and Italy blocked it and then reversed it, and the government schools here blocked it. The Catholic and private schools encouraged it. And and here we have a 3-tier system. Right, so the bottom, I wish it wasn't this. It's like a French flag. I wish it wasn't this stratified here. But we have 3 types of schools. Government schools, I mean, oversimplifying here, they're for the low socioeconomic groups. Generally, there are very few exceptions. Then you've got the middle Catholic schools, for the middle group, and then for the richest 20%, you go to private schools. So the top 2 sort of layers of schools encouraged it. The bottom one banned it, and that tells me that's just going to widen the gap. right? We need to get government schools here on board with ChatGPT, get teachers, because teachers use it. I'm on LinkedIn teachers groups, I'm on Facebook teachers groups. They're always using ChatGPT to plan their lessons, at the same time banning the students from using ChatGPT. This is going to widen the gap. You know, some of the kids here haven't heard of ChatGPT in government schools. Meanwhile, Catholic schools and private schools are encouraging its use and teaching them how to make good prompts and how to get ahead using AI. And that's the right side of history to be on. Jump the skepticism and the opposition, get straight into the embracing it, like every other tool throughout human history. Even nuclear weapons, right? I mean, they could be argued as like a thing we don't want to use, but we are using them as a deterrent. They're extremely effective. We don't have to, press the button for them to be useful. They're just, every tool, including those, have been embraced. So let's do that. Let's not be on the wrong side of history.
That's absolutely true, and I'm totally on board with it. And I'm so happy that there are many people who have actually started to embrace that. One of the questions I have is, when you and I probably went to school, we didn't have anything called social media. Nowadays, we have things like TikTok and Instagram and all of these kind of things. Now, how is schooling being affected by that? And how is the interpersonal relationship between kids being influenced by that, and the relationship perhaps between the parents and the children as well?
That's an interesting one. Well, firstly, for the kids themselves. So Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T is his surname. So Jonathan Haidt's probably, as far as I can tell, the world leader on this. And I follow him on Substack. And I recommend your listeners do as well. Jonathan Haidt. And he's got a book coming out soon on exactly this, on the effect of social media. And he's got lots of data, studies, massive sort of, he's got a Google Doc where people can pull and put in extra studies that have been done on this. And he's building up a picture that is going to go into a book that's coming out in roughly 6 to 12 months time, something like that. So you're talking early 2024, roughly, the book. But it's on the effect of social media and exactly how and who it affects. And the reason there are so many conflicting studies on this is some studies look at screen time, just generic screen time. And if you look at just screen time, it turns out it's not that bad. So there's worries about square eyes and stuff were overblown in multiple ways. People's well-being, academic results, they're not affected really that much by having more screen time. What matters is who is watching. So some demographics are more affected than others. So girls more than boys, poor more than rich, and liberal more than conservative, open to new ideas coming at them, even if they're ridiculous. So who's watching and what you're doing on the screen makes a huge difference. So it turns out watching a movie on the couch with a friend, that's screen time, but that's actually good for your mental health. So, and they found different types of screen time are not equal. So when you break it down, it's what Jonathan Haidt does. And he says, so the people who go, no, this study found no correlation with blah, blah, blah. And he goes, no, look at what the study was measuring. Was it screen time or was it specifically social media doom scrolling? Because in terms of a hierarchy, the worst thing you can do is doom scrolling through influential TikToks, and I'm being very specific here, of glorification of mental health problems. Now, I don't know, TikTok doesn't give me this. It might be that I'm the wrong age bracket, but I've met with young people who've shown me their TikTok For You page, and every roughly fifth video, so you get 4 funny videos, 4 like interesting, funny videos. I don't know, some farmer planting trees in, double time really fast, and then you get some cool solar eclipse effects, this is cool stuff, just relaxing brain downtime for those videos, short videos, something funny. Then every roughly fifth video is a glorification of a self-diagnosed mental illness. And it's oddly specific. Each person gets pushed into this sort of different niche of mental illness. And I don't know whether it's done deliberately by TikTok. I don't think so, because usually these things happen through negligence rather than malice. That's my Occam's razor. I just assume negligence first before I resort to assuming it's malice. But I think the algorithm has just realized people lap that up. And you need the 4 nice funny videos, otherwise it becomes horribly unpalatable because it's all, but it literally is. Every 5th video is like a glorification of a mental illness. And so, for example, let's say an eating disorder, and there'll be somebody who just proclaims to have this and shows what it's like and hashtags and all of that. And then, but they might actually have it for real, but what's interesting is people then start imitating because they realize that gets followers. Other people who don't have it will self-diagnose, make videos about it, to the point that they actually start getting it. And you get this thing, they call it a social contagion, and I wish it wasn't real. But please do read Jonathan Haidt's research on this. This kind of stuff so TikTok does, there was a study done recently. They got 1,000 AIs, actually, and they randomly gave the AIs different interests, really specific interests. So they told the AIs, 1,000, TikTok accounts, 1,000 SIM cards, 1,000, and each AI had its own specific set of interests, like rabbits jumping over fences or something really specific. And the AIs just went through TikTok, and the AIs were judging what's in the video. What can I see in the video? Do I like it? If I do, I'll stay on that for longer. If I don't, no rabbits, scroll. So 30 minutes was the average. So within 30 minutes, TikTok had just put through randomly showing you stuff, had figured out what you want for each of these AIs. And what was more interesting was that after that 30 minutes, if you changed the preferences of the AI, TikTok didn't change its algorithm.
What?
So once you're pushed into that, you're stuck. Like, so you might go in on a bad day, you're feeling like, you think you've got some mental health, whatever. You're stuck there. It gives you that then, even if you change what you want. Now, TikTok has released a reset button somewhere in the settings, so you can reset the algorithm and start again. But who's going to do that? Really, like, it learns so much about you, it pigeonholes you in 30 minutes, and it pushes you down this rabbit hole of celebrating mental illness, and it's very strange. I encourage you to read Jonathan Haidt's work on this. Get on to if you know a young person who you can trust and show you their genuine For You page, because it's a very personal thing. Have a look at what's on it, and it's literally glorifying and celebrating mental health issues beyond awareness. I'm all for awareness. It goes beyond that. It goes towards glorification and FOMO. Like, if you don't have one, you're out of the crowd. You need one. It's gone way too far. And I'm all for acceptance, of course, understanding, education about it, awareness. But it's gone way too far. And some of these people they look like they're mocking the mental health issues, because you can look at them and go, nah, that's not real. That doesn't look real. You're doing this for the followers, the likes, the views. But it's very strange. And some of these mental health issues have gone from nearly zero to being quite prevalent. The most common one was, I think it was the end of last year or the year before, the Tourette's thing. Did you hear about that?
No, I barely use TikTok.
Yeah, Tourette's. So real, right? This sounds like a Black Mirror
dystopian nightmare, man.
Well, our kids are there, and adults don't tend to know. Like, they don't browse the For You page, right? But as a teacher, occasionally, I've been to so many schools, seen thousands of students. I've literally, I've seen this. So the Tourette's thing was this one specific example where it was in the US only, not Canada. It was in the US, where one of the mental health issues that spread for whatever reason was Tourette's, and that just became, again, a very niche, sort of quite a minor issue. Like, it's not very prevalent, but it rocketed, and people started presenting to GPs suddenly within 2 months of having Tourette's. On sudden onset Tourette's, by the way. Like, they never had the history of it, and they suddenly got Tourette's. Then they realized, the GPs, that there was a pattern in this sudden explosion of diagnoses of Tourette's. And so these were TikTok addicts and Instagram addicts, social media doom scrolling addicts. And what they found was that they had been, when they interviewed them, they showed that, actually, I've been shown loads and loads of Tourette's videos. Now, I wish it wasn't true, but some mental health issues are amplified through repeated exposure by the algorithm, and the algorithm knows that, and it shows you more. And I'm not saying China does this right, but China shuts stuff like that down. Now, I'm all for freedom of speech and freedom of press, but when you're amplifying stuff to the point that it's causing mass harm, I do ask question. There was, like for example, the way that China treats its, China has occasionally, not very often, but they'll have like a mass killing, like in the US, they happen all the time. But in China, when that happens, the press just doesn't mention it. Now, or they mention it like just once somewhere, and then they don't talk about it constantly and ruminate on it and make it look normal, which is, I think, the amplification is possibly too much, maybe, because it doesn't seem to be working. It's still happening in the US. The amplification of these issues has not worked. The Chinese just keep it quiet. Now, whether they have fewer of them, we'll never know because they keep it quiet. So we don't know whether that works either, but certainly what we're doing is not working. We amplify these issues. They spread And the Tourette's is the most famous one, but there are others, and some of them are so oddly specific, but they spread through TikTok. Dangerous.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they've banned smartphones here now in schools across the board.
Wait, in China or in your side
Here.
of it? Okay.
Here in Australia, our state has just banned smartphones in schools for kids.
That's, man. I hope things get better over time.
Yeah. Well, it's what do you do? I think the easiest fix is just get TikTok to tweak a few things. That's all. Make the algorithm automatically reset every week, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I didn't realize this problem was this bad.
You see it as a teacher, like adults have not seen it yet, I think. But the fact that I'm in classrooms with grade 7 to grade 12, I see it. And they'll notice eventually. The adults will notice eventually when these kids graduate, they come out into society in 5 years' time.
Oh, man.
Then they'll see.
All right. We can start wrapping things up a little bit. We probably have another podcast. We're going to do another one because I have these topics that I really wanted to delve into, but that can wait for the next one, and we'll keep it all going. But I really want to, first of all, before we get into the final plugs, I want you to give me a paper trail of all the books you've written, because in case somebody's interested in chemophobia or any of the topics that you've covered in detail, I want them to go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, I'll give you one, right? Everything is Natural. Everything is Natural is my book. It's published with the Royal Society of Chemistry, and Everything is Natural. It's 2021 that I published that, and it's blurring the lines between natural and artificial, and saying that actually humans have engaged with nature and utilized it and manipulated it and actually improved it for thousands of years. Let's not forget that. Let's thank our ancestors for doing that. We are just continuing that journey. The extra processing and manufacturing we are doing, yes, we have to look after nature for sustainability, from a sustainability perspective, but we've been using nature to our advantage and improving it for its own good and survival for a very long time. We've been tending the landscape for a long time. Let's keep doing that. Not let's go back to wilderness and hunter-gatherer times. Like, let's celebrate the work that our ancestors did. Everything is natural. And it talks about the history of how we became fearful of chemicals and the sort of recent question marks over human influence on the earth, and sort of tries to allay some of those fears. So Everything is Natural. I've got other books as well, but they're very academic, so I'd recommend just that one for listeners. The others are like...
Knowing me, I might just go and sneak into your academic sort of list and start reading those books.
It's chemical equations and stuff. I'd rather... Yeah, Everything is Natural. That's the one to go for.
All right, I'll put that in the show notes as well. And speaking of show notes, how can people find you and reach out and communicate with you?
Yeah, good question. So I would say go to my website, so jameskennedymonash.wordpress.com, and you'll find a sort of summary of recent stuff that I've done there. All the books are on there, any podcast appearances. How about this? Twitter. You can get my Twitter handle in the description as well. James Kennedy EDU.
Sounds fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the nukes of information that you threw at me and blew my mind. Like, I just feel like I just came out from under a rock. And so thank you.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure, Fahad. It's great.
Get ready for an adrenaline-fueled adventure. Our next episode features Jesse, an EnergyPod customer with captivating and mind-blowing stories from his incredible journeys across the country. Prepare to be hooked by Jesse's captivating tales of adventure, excitement, and inspiration. Don't miss this thrilling episode coming to you next week. Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to our Energize, Explore, Enjoy podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. See you next week.